Hi, I'm cKnoor, and this is my Beginner's Guide to Blood Bowl, Episode 6. Now, Episode 6 is special because it's the mailbag. A few days ago, I asked you on Twitter to send me questions over ask.fm, and I got a bunch. Unfortunately, some of them were shit, some of them were too long to cover in a mailbag episode, and most of them were just right. Unfortunately, most of the just right questions were too many to cover in a single mailbag episode, so I'm gonna have to get back to them. Actually, I'll probably just answer them over ask.fm. So if you don't get your answer in this episode, and you thought your question was great, which it probably was, head over to my profile and see if I answered it. I probably have. Now, before we get started, please note that these are my personal answers to stuff. Not everything is going to be perhaps what you think is the proper answer, but this is what I think about, well, Blood Bowl and general stuff. You know, like, I'm not wrong or anything, because I'm always right, as you know. First question! Could you explain how getting journeyman/loners for free works? And maybe you can talk about what inducements are worth getting in general as well. Sure. Getting free journeyman is actually pretty simple. If you have less than 11 players on your team at the start of a match, the game is going to give you journeymen to fill those slots up till 11. So if you've got 9 players showing up, the game's going to give you 2 free journeymen. The thing that's a bit tricky is that the way Cyanide handles team value is that they show the team value of your team rather than your team plus whatever journeyman you'd need for the next game. So if you go into a game expecting to have a team value of, say, 960, because you're missing 2 players, and then you might end up having a team value of, say, 1,100, it might screw you up, especially if you're counting on inducements, because you didn't realize that the team value changes once you get in-game and get those journeymen. In any case, what inducements are good to get? Honestly, most of them are. It depends a bit on what type of team you're playing. If you have inducements that are less than 100k, you can only buy Bloodweiser Babes. So if you have more than 50 but less than 100, buy a Bloodweiser Babe. If you have 100k or more, you can pick between a bribe, extra training, which means a reroll, an Igor if you're necromantic or undead, I think, and, well, Wandering Apothecaries. They're also 100k. Out of those, it depends on what team you're up against. If you're goblins and want to foul a lot, bribes are good. If you think you're going to get hurt a lot, Wandering Apothecaries are good. If you think you're going to fail a lot of rolls, then the extra reroll in extra training is good. It totally depends on what team you're playing against. If you manage to get enough inducement money to top 150, you can buy a wizard. A wizard's really good, especially if you're playing in a tournament, because a wizard can probably stop a drive, and hopefully you can steal the ball that way. I've covered wizards in an earlier guide, so go check out that if you want to know more about them, but I like them a lot, especially if you're playing fast teams that don't do much bashing. In those cases, it's really good. You can always get mercenaries, and they cost from not that much till too much. I'm not going to go through all of them saying which ones are good, which ones are bad, but in general, you're not going to get enough inducement money to afford the good ones, and some are really overpriced. General rule of thumb, if you get between 50k and 100k, get Bloodweiser Babes. If you have 100k, get an Apothecary or a reroll. And if you have 150, I would get the Wizard. And if you get 200, maybe the Wizard and a Babe. Who knows? Can you provide a quick rundown of common skill ups and the best order to take them in? Well, that depends on what team you're playing and what skills they have access to. So instead of answering your question, I'm going to give you my top skill in every skill tier. That means my favorite skill in, regular, agility, strength, passing, and mutation. Now, I personally like passive skills, and by that I mean skills that always work. Examples of passive skills would be block, guard, and dodge. Even if it's not your turn, they're going to work in your favor. If someone blocks you and you have block, you're safer. If someone blocks you and you have dodge and they don't have tackle, once again you're safer. And guard always gives assist. That's really good. So, and this isn't for a specific team, please note that. This is just looking at the skills and trying to decide which one I like the best, or rather, which one you get the most value out of. So, in general, block, in strength, guard, and in agility, dodge. Now, passing and mutations, that's a bit trickier because passing has a lot of passing skills, which are good if you're a thrower. It also has a bunch of, actually has one general skill, leader, which is good if you're not a thrower. And it has, well, actually, that's pretty much it. Since not every player on every team is a thrower, I'm going to say leader is really good because it gives you an extra reroll. Now, depending on what team you have, rerolls might cost a lot, it might cost less than a lot. A leader reroll probably costs less when talking about team value wise, so it's usually a good investment. Now, mutations, ooh, there's so much good stuff over here. You got 2 heads, making it easier to dodge. You've got claw, making every armor you're blocking armor value 7. Unless they're less than armor value 7, of course. Lots of cool stuff. If you have access to mutation, you're probably a bashy team or underworld. So claw is always going to be good. So my favorite there is actually claw, because it makes everyone scared of you. Those are my top 5 skills, one in each skill tier, but that doesn't mean they're always the best one to pick. You have to look at what your team has already. If you got a lot of block, maybe it's time to get wrestle. If you got a lot of dodge, maybe it's time to get more dodge. I don't know. I like those skills. What would you say works better in a league? Building a generally good team skill-wise, or building players to handle upcoming opponents / troubled players' skills? I think you understand what I'm trying to convey, hopefully. I would say that it's almost always better to build a generally good team skill-wise. And the reason for this is because you're probably going to play more than one game in a league. So focusing players on your team to counter other players, that just means that you can't focus on what your team is good at. Now, the worst team, from my experience, to come up against in a league is a well-developed team. It doesn't matter if it's Norse, if it's Amazon, if it's Pro Elf, if it's Wood Elves, if it's Orc, if it's Murder Chaos, or Chaos Dwarfs. If they're good at what they do, they're going to be much, much harder to beat. Especially compared to a team that's got a bunch of mishmash skills, some of which don't do nothing to me. If you have tackle on a bunch of your players because you played an Amazon team before me, and then I come along and play, let's say, Khemri, then you've just wasted a bunch of tackle because I don't have dodge. I'm never going to dodge. You're not going to get anything out of it. So that's why I personally would advise you to build a generally good team skill-wise. What would you say the most and least intelligent Blood Bowl players are? Well, clearly, the most intelligent Blood Bowl player, even though I hate to admit it, is the Death Roller. Because if you're gonna go onto a pitch and probably be murdered, why not use a secret weapon? Worst case scenario, you get booted, in which case, if you get booted, you're probably still alive. And if you're gonna use a secret weapon, why not use a freaking death cart that's gonna maim and kill your opponent? And that's actually too strong to take down easily. It seems like the smartest option to me. Well, at least if I was a Blood Bowl player. It seems safer than everything else, and even then it's not very safe. Now, least intelligent player, trickier. At first I thought Snotlings, because they are really weak, and they have no armor value to speak of, and they hang out with ogres that will probably sit on them if they forget that they're there. But it seems like Snotlings are a bit too stupid to even be called intelligent. So I'm gonna go with halflings here, because at least halflings we know have a working brain. They know how to do stuff, and they still decide to get on the pitch and get maimed, which is just insane. That to me means that they're not very, well, they're intelligent, but they're stupid. So I'm gonna go with halflings on that one. And last but not least, why all you get is flash, 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 you lucker noob. And I do realize that this is a joke question, but there is like something I kind of want to talk about when it comes to being a lucker noob. And it's that I'm not. I don't really know how to attack this topic, in that some people are lucky in Blood Bowl and some people are not. But what I think I want to say is that yes, some games you're going to be luckier than others, but what matters when you're playing Blood Bowl isn't so much how lucky you are with the dice roll, but that you are able to capitalize on luck and minimize, let's say, misfortune. I've done a lot of really sweet lucky plays that only pay off if you roll a 5 or a 6 on an intercept or passing to a player in 3 tackle zones and them grabbing it and then dodging out and scoring. And that happens. Yes, I mean, we got it on video, so of course it happens. But there's also, before I do something like that, I usually look around and see, okay, so what's the worst that can happen if this fails? Because it's probably going to fail. Whenever I do my really lucky stuff, I usually do it because I've realized that, well, I could try and do this, and the worst that can happen is that I don't succeed, but I don't think my opponent can capitalize on my risky play. And if that's the case, then maybe I'll do the risky play. I mean, also, when it comes to my playstyles on the videos on YouTube, it's mostly that I play for an audience. And if you play for an audience, you don't really want to do the safest thing all the time. Sometimes you just want to try and do that Hail Mary pass in something more because it's fun than it is actually good strategy. But even if you're trying to do something that's fun, you have to look at the situation and see, what's the worst that can happen if I fail? If you look at it like, well, worst case scenario isn't horrible, my opponent can't run and score a touchdown if I fuck this up, then it might be worth the risk. I'm not telling you to play risky, I'm telling you to manage risk. And if you do that properly, you too can be a lucker noob. And those were actually all the questions I had time for. I got a bunch more questions, as I said in the intro, and I actually had to cut questions out of this episode to make it fit into something that's not super long. If you still have Blood Bowl questions, ask them in the comment, ask them on Twitter or the Steam community, and I will try and answer them, or hopefully someone else who's smart might be able to answer them. Next time, we're back on topic and we won't have a mailbag. I haven't decided what we're going to talk about yet, but in the meantime, why not click on these old beginner's guides that you've already watched like 3 or 4 times. You can just click them. Or show up on Friday or any other time I stream Blood Bowl. I have been getting way better at posting my Blood Bowl times in the Steam community. So join that if you haven't already, if you want to catch me playing Blood Bowl live. Everything's posted in your local times. It's way easier to figure out than it used to be. So go click links and stuff. And I'll see you next time.